I hate the Chiefs. Yeah, that's right, I'm back. I disappeared for a couple months there, but hey, I'm back, ready to review this thing. First, I just want to do a little self-advertising. If you go over to one of my other channels, you just look up my name, Gavin Sales, you will find my short film, which I was producing recently. Well, not producing, I directed it. Whatever, I directed a short film, and it's on my other channel. You should take a look at it. I think it's pretty good, and I'm pretty happy with it. But that's what I've been doing. I've been working on that, working on college, went on winter break for a bit, now with my trusty 7-Up. But I am back and ready to do another episode of First Impressions, which is the show where we review things 24 hours or less after they've come out. Today we are reviewing Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the new Disney Plus show, which finale came out last night. So I watched it. I watched all 8 episodes, and I am here to give my thoughts on the movie. So, here we go. A little background about my relationship with this show. Growing up, Percy Jackson was the cream of the crop for books for kids, probably between 12 and 15. I don't know, that's probably when I read it. But I actually own every single book in the Percy Jackson series, the follow-up series, the Magnus Chase series, the Kane Chronicles, all the tie-ins, all the others. I was obsessed with this series. Trials of Apollo, I even got through those. But I was obsessed with this series as a kid, and unfortunately there was no good supplemental movie material to go along with it. So when I heard that they were making a new version, a version of it, I was very excited, especially after hearing that Rick Riordan would not only be a writer, but a very high-powered creative consultant on the project, and I was very excited to see what this was all about. And then of course they announced Walker Scobell would be in it, and I was even more excited because he is just a great actor. I've seen some of his other smaller stuff, and he is truly talented, someone to really keep your eye on. And I was also excited to see how close they would get to the source material in the book, and I can in fact confirm that they did a pretty good job, honestly. Also, can we just talk about this poster? I feel like movie posters have been really bad recently, but I like this one. I think it's kind of cool. I know it's a little basic. It looks exactly like the Force Awakens poster, which is kind of one of looked at as the goofiest poster, but I don't know. I kind of like it. It's kind of fun to me. Alright, let's dive into this thing. I want to talk about the plot first. As far as the plot goes, I think it was a really, really good adaptation for the most part. They kept all the main story beats in there, and the beginning was the same, the end was the same. The characters, I feel like, were written fairly accurately to what they were like in the books and had decent development. They changed they made a couple tweaks, they tweaked the character of Hades a bit. He is not quite as written in the book, but I felt like they made it work really well because he's not a major character. He's in one scene. Which honestly, I think what part of that is that they had the OG writer of the books in on it, and not only just in on it like they said it for publicity, but he was very, very active in the preparation of this show, and I think that's really one of the things that helped get it on the road. But I really liked how they kept it mostly the same. The only things they changed were stuff that I don't think any of the changes really made the book drop in quality. I think they were all changes that I could get on board with. For instance, the Medusa change is, I think, the first major change in the book, because they made the scene a lot different. It plays differently, and she's more of a sympathetic character. You really get to know multiple sides and angles to her, what makes her a rounded character, whereas in the book she was kind of just this flat character that doesn't really have a ton of depth to her. But I feel like they added some depth in the scene, and I kind of liked that change a lot. Some other changes they made were stuff that it didn't really matter. For instance, the ending scene with Luke's betrayal is a bit different. For instance, in the book, there was an attack by some scorpions that Luke sends out. I feel like the scorpions were a nice analogy in the book and a nice metaphor, like a tool that Rick Riordan used, but I don't feel like it was necessary, and I wasn't shitting my pants over there not being a scorpion attack in the end. It really didn't make a big difference, and a lot of the changes were like that. There were also some changes such as Grover losing an extra orb that they had. I feel like it really didn't change the plot at all. I'm not really sure why they added that. Maybe it was to sort of make Poseidon seem more supportive, that he would give them 4 orbs and think about who's gonna be going home, but I don't really feel like it really made too big of an impact on that. Also, notably, the dialogue was really good. When you have one of these types of things where it's a old concept kind of in a new world, you have the Greek gods in Manhattan, stuff like similar to this vein, you can oftentimes fall into the trap of corny dialogue. But I didn't find the dialogue corny or cheesy in really any places. I felt like they did a really good job making it just seem like, yeah, it's magic stuff that goes on, but like, the dialogue is natural. It doesn't feel like it's a way that people don't talk. And they also made it so that like characters like Chiron, who are ancient, kind of have this older way of talking, because he kind of, I feel like, represents the old ways a little bit. He's a little bit of a metaphor for that. But I felt like the dialogue made a lot of sense. The one notable exception to this thought that I had is that I thought that the dialogue written for Mr. D, played by Jason Mantzoukas, I said that wrong, was not particularly great with how the direction of the character was, because he talks in this sort of like very formal grammar, and yet his character is a very like hip, chill sort of character who doesn't really care, and so it kind of clashes with his attitude and the dialogue that was written for him. But that was it, honestly. I feel like his dialogue was not really matchy, but that was honestly about it. There were a couple oddities, like the orbs that Poseidon gives the group being 4 instead of 3. And also the fact that Annabeth Chase just disappears from the last scene. Like, she uses one of the orbs early, and for some reason, because she gets trapped, I don't know why they wrote that in there, and then she's just not there for the encounter with Hades. I didn't really get why. It felt like it was a bit of a silly detail. Maybe they wanted to pad runtime, but like, it would have been nice to have seen Annabeth there because she was a part of the main quest. I don't know why she used the orb early. I don't know why they decided to do that. There were a couple oddities, but it was nothing that like ruined the plot. It wasn't like Annabeth being there would have changed the entire game. It was just like a little bit of confusion there, which I would like to hear why they decided to do that. The other serious change is that Gabe, the stepfather of Percy, was changed significantly. In the books, he's a very detestable character who is just cruel to Percy and his mom, and is just terrible to put up with, and you feel really bad for Percy and his mom being in this situation. While in the movies, he's just kind of airhead, I guess, or not really an airhead. He's just like very unintelligent, stupid, very uninvolved, and I feel like his impact wasn't as serious because Gabe was one of the things that stuck with me in the beginning of the book, and when I was reading the book, and I feel like they kind of lost his impact when they decided to kind of tone down the darker sides of his character, because it also added a serious contrast between life at the Camp Half-Blood and life in the apartment with Gabe and Percy's mom. I feel like that was a nice contrast that was kind of lost in the show. I'm gonna talk about the acting a little bit because I legitimately believe this is one of the most well-casted shows in recent memory. I was just blown away by how well nearly every single casting choice fit the character that was written. For instance, Percy, Walker Scobell, and Grover, played by Aryan, were quite literally, I do not think you could have found better child actors for them. Aryan just gives off extreme timid Grover vibes, and Percy is just, I mean, I don't know how to explain it even. It's just perfect casting in that, right? Also, a lot of times there'll be like good casting for the major characters, but the supporting characters will be kind of eh. But no, even the supporting and minor characters were also casted well. I felt like Mrs. Dodds was casted incredibly. Of course, being played by Megan Mullally, who is known for Will and Grace, this sitcom from a while back, which is kind of funny to me that these are very different roles for her, but that's just the joy of acting, is that you get to play a lot of different roles. But like characters like Mrs. Dodds, and also Zeus as Lance Reddick, I feel like was a serious standout. Timothy Osmondson's Hephaestus was a nice little cameo, but honestly was extremely impactful to me. I feel like they really increased Hephaestus' role, and in a really good way. They added a lot of development to him and a lot of background through his little speech, but also people like Adam Copeland as Ares, who was one of the standouts to me. Like, I've never really heard of Adam Copeland before this, but I'm sorry I didn't, because I feel like he added this really nice charisma but danger sort of aspect to him, to his character, and I feel like he did a really great job with that. Additionally, I feel like Virginia Cole's Percy's mother is not talked about enough, because I feel like she did a fantastic job being this character who is almost exactly as I envisioned her in when I was reading the book. This very, like, kind soul who is willing to let her son believe she's the bad guy in order to do the right thing for him. For instance, Percy, there's a flashback scene where young Percy hates his mom for making him go to this boarding school, and she doesn't tell him why, because she wants to keep him safe as long as possible, but she lets Percy believe that she's the bad guy because she wants him, what is best for him and not for their relationship. Although they do have a very good relationship, because I feel like Percy grows up learning that his mother did all the right sort of things for him. She just does a really good job portraying that conflict. I feel like that that flashback scene was particularly incredible. She did a great job portraying the conflict that her character was feeling at the time, and I feel like Virginia Cole is not getting enough recognition for just how well she played that character. There were a couple mids in the cast, but notably Tim Sharp, although I don't think it's his fault. Tim Sharp played Gabe, and I don't think that it was his fault. I think it was just the way he was written. He played what was written for him quite well. It was just that I didn't like what was written for him. Another mid is also Lin-Manuel Miranda. I feel like, sure, Lin-Manuel Miranda's a great actor. Sure, he wrote Hamilton. Sure, and Kondo, all these things. But, like, I wasn't super attached to him as Hermes. It just felt like he existed. You may have noticed that I've left out talking about Annabeth, played by Leah Jeffries until now, and that's because I had a very interesting arc, kind of how I felt about Annabeth. Because in the books, Annabeth is this very, like, sarcastic, snarky character who eventually we see why, as more information is revealed about her past, and then later she comes around to like Percy, and it's a nice arc for her in the book. In the show, I didn't feel it as much at first. At first, and notice I'm saying at first I noticed that she was less snarky and less sarcastic and more just rude, and I didn't really like that, because, like, the first time we meet Annabeth, she's laughing at Percy and kind of snorting to herself. The whole "you drool when you sleep" line is the first thing she says to Percy, and she was always just kind of, she had, like, this playful air about her, like, yeah, she didn't like this guy and she was jealous of him, but she took the time to be sarcastic and snarky about it. While in this show, I feel like she's written, or it's not even the writing, it's more, I didn't like the directing in the first episode or two, because I felt like they were leading Annabeth down a way to deliver her lines that was less of that sarcastic flair we know and more just rude. And I didn't feel as attached to her character because of that. However, as the episodes go, I feel like the direction gets a lot better, and they're able to really bring Annabeth's other characteristics out as they go. And this isn't anything due to Leah Jeffries' acting. I feel like this is more of a directing problem, which unfortunately took out its toll on Annabeth and Leah Jeffries. But I don't think it was her acting. I think that was more of a directing problem. The only sour point I had with the actors was Charlie Bushnell, who played Luke. This was not at all the Luke that I imagined when I was reading this book. I feel like in the book, Luke is this character who is very much a great mentor for Percy, very friendly, full of life, wanting to welcome everyone into the camp, and be this very positive role model. And he is still kind of a mentor for Percy in the show, but the actor just seems bored. I mean, Charlie Bushnell he doesn't quite bring the level of warmth to Luke that I would have liked to have seen. I feel like he's very forgettable. He has this very boring drone of a voice with no, like, real inflection there, and I'm a bit concerned to see how that kind of pans out in later seasons. However, I did notice in the end of the show, he did bring a bit more power to his delivery of the lines, and I think that might just be a directing thing, because I did notice that the directing and the overall vision really came together further along in the show than it did at the beginning. That was one of the weaknesses of the first 2 episodes, is I didn't feel like the direction was as strong, and they were getting the best performances out of the actors as they could in the beginning. And that could be maybe they filmed the last episodes last, and maybe they filmed the early episodes early, or maybe it was a directing thing, because this wasn't just directed by one person. I think it was directed by James Bobin in the early episodes, and maybe James just isn't as strong of a director. But I did notice that Charlie was still a weak point in the cast, and I'm interested to see how in Season 2 they start to kind of increase the level of passion that Luke's character has. Now I want to talk about some technicals, the more technical aspects of things, because I am in film school now, so now I'm starting to kind of like obsess over those things. I'm in a production class right now, so that's kind of what is on my mind at all times. Anyways, let us get past that minor flex, weird flex but okay, and get into the technicals. The first thing I noticed about this show is the CGI was surprisingly good. Disney has recently become known for CGI taking a massive downfall, especially in their Marvel products, such as Thor: Love and Thunder, and things like that. But I was pleasantly surprised. I thought the CGI was honestly pretty dang solid across the board. We have to note that this is a TV show, and it is a show that doesn't have an insane budget, so we have to kind of take that into account. But even taking that into account, I still thought that the CGI was reasonably good. It wasn't like groundbreaking or incredible or the best I've seen in recent memory, but I thought that this was a decent CGI, and I thought it really did. I wasn't like looking at it and going, oh, this is taking me out of the experience. No, I felt like it kept me in that experience, and for the most part, it was very good. There were a couple moments where it was pretty see-through. I thought that Dodds didn't really look that good when she was in her Fury form. I thought that she looked a little bit cheap in that first episode. And also the St. Louis arch scene. There's this part where this arch blows up, and Percy is hanging off this ledge, and you can see the ground under him. And that CGI was very see-through. It was very green screeny, and I thought that that was a very noticeable hole in the consistent CGI. But honestly, other than those 2 moments, I really didn't have any big gripes with the CGI, which I normally do, because I'm a very much a prosthetics and practical effects sort of person. But I feel like the CGI, despite me normally being critical of it, was pretty well used here. Particular moments that really stood out to me was the water nymph in episodes 6 or 7, where Percy talks to a water nymph underwater and she has this hair flowing all around. I thought she looked fantastic. Also, shout out to the lighting team in that scene, because I feel like the lighting was particularly great. Another great moment was the Minotaur in the first episode. I thought the Minotaur looked phenomenal. Another shout out to the lighting team, which is what I want to talk about next, because the lighting team did phenomenally on this show. Like, when I was watching the trailers and the promotional material, I didn't quite like it as much. I was a little unsure. But I don't know if I was just being biased and being critical of something I love, or if they legitimately went back and changed it, because I loved the lighting in this show. I felt like their use of colored lights, of different sources of light, of fills — they love to use fills in this show, I noticed there was a ton of fill lights — was just, honestly, I loved it. Recent shows in the past 5-10 years have had this problem where the shows are just too dark, and you can't really see anything. I've noticed that recently, as I have to turn the brightness way up on my screen and I still can't see shit, because it's just too dark. A notable example of this being the recent Obi-Wan Kenobi show. I felt that as a show it was just far too dark and I couldn't see what was going on in important moments. But in this show I felt like the lighting was great, particularly in that Minotaur scene, because the Minotaur was very well done with CGI. I loved the way he looked, and they lit him so well with these lovely blues and purples and this bright white from this lightning, and it was just such an incredible looking moment. And I really love the lighting and CGI, so praise to them, because they just did phenomenally. Talking about how this show grew on me more, is the music grew on me. And I don't think that was me this time. I think that the work of Bear McCreary and the editors worked really well together, because they put more music in, and the music became more grand and more noticeable and more present as the show went on. I think that was on purpose, because in episodes 1 through about 4, there really wasn't that much musical cues. You had stuff here and there, sure, you had some violins and scenes that needed it, you had some stuff, but it was never very much. It was all this very much ambient, And there were also, it wasn't used all the time. There were scenes where there wasn't music at all. And at first I was a little bit hesitant about that because I was expecting some cool themes, because the music is done by Bear McCreary, who I think is a very underrated composer for films. But as it went on, I noticed that they were starting to add more stuff here. They were adding more brass, they were adding more ostinatos, more different things to recognize as the show went on, and it became more grand, to the point where you had episodes 7 and 8, where the music was very noticeable, and you started to hear these themes and stuff like that. And it was just, it was really cool to see that direction. As things kind of heat up and get more tense in the show, so does the music, and I felt like they did a really, really cool job kind of ramping that up as they did. Also, the end credits music. I love the end credits music. It's so simple. It's just a it's so simple. It's just this ostinato, but it works so well, especially with the visuals in the end credits, because normally end credit visuals, like, they're okay. Like, sometimes you have some standouts like Mandalorian, but typically it's just kind of boring. Maybe you'll have some kind of screenshot or whatever, but like, it's nothing too crazy. But in this show, it was kind of like The Mandalorian, in that there's these really cool, like, designs where The Mandalorian uses concept art while this one uses its own unique thing. But it's the same kind of style where it's still images, but they zoom and kind of move a little bit as you're watching them, and it adds this kind of mesmerizing sort of view, which also ties it back to the ancient Greek roots that the writing has. And I really, really, really liked that. I thought the end credits were phenomenal and some of the best I've seen in recent memory. My one mild complaint in the music department is that there were some kind of clumsily inserted pop songs. The two notable ones being the Olivia Rodrigo song at the beginning of episode 1 and the Dua Lipa song in the casino scene. I felt like those didn't really match, because there was no real expectation for the casino scene, because we hadn't really heard pop songs except for the Olivia Rodrigo one, which I'll get to in a second. And so we weren't really expecting it, so when there was one, it didn't really hit with me. It was just kind of like, why is Dua Lipa's Levitating playing? Also, Levitating was such a poor choice for that scene. They could have chosen so many other better songs. Even Dua Lipa has better songs in her discography. But Levitating is this stupid, well-worn, overstayed its welcome pop song that we've heard everywhere on TikTok and the mall and the whatever. And they could have chosen such a better song for that scene, literally anything. And the Olivia Rodrigo song at the beginning, it's a good song, sure, but it kind of felt clumsy. It was on for like 15 seconds, and it was just this moment where I feel like was very emotional, how Percy's mom is just sitting in the rain thinking about Poseidon. And I feel that could have been a really impactful moment if there was either no music at all, or like this kind of underlying sort of strings vibrato thing. I feel like there could have been a better choice that was made than an Olivia Rodrigo song. It just felt awkward to me. As for the cinematography, I felt like it was pretty good. I felt like there were some shots that kind of made me go, ooh. Like there was this one puddle shot in, I think, episode 4, where there's Percy and his friends run over a puddle, and I think that shot is very well done. If you know what I mean, good. If you don't know, sorry. But I felt like the cinematography was good. It wasn't distracting to me. I didn't notice any shaky cam, which, thank God, I hate shaky cam, and they didn't use any of it. And I was so happy to see that, because it's such an overused technique in recent years, and they didn't have any of that. So I wasn't distracted by the cinematography, which is a cinematographer's job, to not distract you. There weren't too many shots that were like, wow, that's a great shot, except that one I mentioned earlier. But I felt like the cinematography was good, and I think that the cinematographer did their job and made a show and constructed it well. One of the things about adaptations is there's really good ways to do adaptations and really bad ways to do adaptations. So, with how they adapted this show, I felt like they did a very, very good job. As I stated earlier, this is a bit of restating, but they really, really took what was great about the book and recognized that, and really formed it into a great building block. And then they looked at the book, and Rick Riordan, looking back at a book that was written 19 years ago, went, I could have written that better, which all artists do. I do it when I look at my music and my shows that I make. I go, I could have done that better, I could have done that better. And of course, Rick, being an artist, would do the same. And so he looks back and kind of looks at what he could have done better. And I feel like he really adapted it in a way that was really good and felt genuine. Like that Medusa scene, very big change. The Waterland scene, very big change. The Lotus Casino, very big change. Stuff like that. There were really big changes. But they were stuff that made sense, was well executed, and didn't feel like it was blasphemous to the core structure. It was just the details that were changed. And the core structure remained the same. And I think that is how you do an adaptation if you're going to change something. Because you could change nothing and do great. Lord of the Rings, for example. Great. They didn't change very much at all. They had tweaks here and there, but it was stuff they had to do rather than stuff they could do. But I feel like Percy Jackson is not a literary masterpiece that will survive centuries like Lord of the Rings are, so they had to make those changes, and they did really well with them and executed phenomenally. My only main concern is maybe they kind of relied on people knowing what's going on a little bit too much. For instance, they don't explain the mist, which is an important concept to grasp until episode 3, and they also kind of glazed over celestial bronze for a while. These are concepts that are pretty important to understanding the core of what makes the world building function, and I feel like they left off a little bit too long, kind of expected. Yeah, you just get an idea of what this is, we'll tell you later. When I feel like for a new fan it might be difficult to get into this thing and kind of know fully what's going on until later on. I feel like that was their one major, it's not even that major, it's a mild issue, is I'm concerned for people who have never read the books watching this for the first time. They might get a little bit lost. But they also recognize that their audience is going to be widely people who have read the book before. This is going to be people ranging from probably around 15 to 25-ish, 30, I don't really know, who read this as kids and as young adults, or not really young adults, you know what I mean. People who read this in formative years and know what's going on. And they recognize that 90% of the people have read the book, and so maybe they didn't really need to lean into that, explaining everything right from the get-go. So, it's a mild gripe, but it's a gripe nonetheless. My verdict, I really liked this show. This was probably one of the better Disney Plus originals to come out in recent memory. I think it stacks up there with stuff like Mandalorian and stuff like that as one of the better original shows to come out since Disney Plus's conception. And I do have my minor gripes with it, but it was nothing major. I would say my only gripe is that the first couple episodes were weak. Not weak, but weaker. I can't even call them weak. 1 and 2 kind of get off to a slow start, 3 and 4 build it up a little bit, and then 5 through 8 are very, very good. A lot of 5 through 8, 1 through 2 are a little weak. But it wasn't even that 1 and 2 were that weak. It was just a bit of a slow burn to start. So maybe that's a pacing problem, but honestly, besides the pacing and the very minor nitpicks I went over already, this show was really, really good, and I had a great time watching it. I feel like they did a great job with the source material, and I can't really complain that much, which is going to give me the opportunity to bestow upon this show the grade of an A-. I love this show, and I am excited to see Season 2, which I imagine will come in roughly a year. But yeah, I really love this show, and I'm curious to see what other people think, because I heard a lot of mixed opinions as this show is going on, through social media, through friends. I heard some mixed opinions, but honestly, I don't really see where the negatives come from. I've loved this show, and I'm curious to see what you think. More videos coming soon. That's going to do it for this one, though. I've got some more stuff coming. For instance, I've got some months-old footage of me and my friends playing Mafia that I really need to get to, because that was recorded over the summer, and it's been 6 months, and I really, really, really need to use that footage. So expect that coming soon, expect more Halo CE fandoms, expect more reviews, and I will catch you in the next one. Until then, see ya.